John, if you're in the market for a used 911, chances are you're a keen driver, and if you're a keen driver, you can't get much better than a GT3, can you?
You definitely can't. The GT3 has really established itself as a clear model in its own right within the 911 range, and we've just recently launched the 991 version of the GT3. The car uses a lot of components from our motorsport division. It's around 95% the same as actually the GT3 Cup car, which is the car that contests the Carrera Cup series around the world. It is, ultimately the road car that you can use every day that most feels like a race car. It feels special, you get inside it and you can just feel that the car is distinctly attached to the track and to motorsport.
The 997 Series 911 went on sale in 2004, but it took Porsche another 2 years to come up with the amazing GT3 version. It's completely road legal, but to all intents and purposes, this is a racing car, and it's built with hardcore track use in mind. In fact, part of the reason Porsche built this thing was so that the company could homologate motorsport parts to use in their own racing activities. And you can see that in the details. This redesigned front bumper has got much larger air intakes to improve cooling, and the whole car sits 30 mil lower to the ground. The enormous wing on the rear end generates maximum downforce, while the centrally mounted exhaust help the engine to breathe better. And what an engine it is! The first generation GT3 came with a 3.6 litre flat six engine that developed 409 brake horsepower. 0 to 60 in this car took 4.1 seconds. When the Mark II came along in 2009, the 3.6 was swapped for a 3.8. This gave another 20 horsepower and trimmed the 0 to 60 dash by a further 1/10 of a second. Then there were the GT3 RS versions, and these were more focused still. They were about 25 kilos lighter because they had a stripped out interior and various body panels made out of lightweight carbon fibre and aluminium. They also had a plastic rear window rather than a glass one. Both versions of the GT3 RS also had a wider rear track, and the Mark II was also wider on the front axle. It also had more power than the corresponding GT3, taking the output up to 444 brake horsepower. There was one final version of the GT3 RS, and this was the 4 litre, which, as the name suggests, had a bigger engine that hiked power to 493 brake horsepower. As ever with the 911, it's not just about choosing a GT3. What with the 3.6, 3.8 and 4 litre engines, plus the choice between standard GT3 and GT3 RS, there are lots of different flavours to choose from. What do you think is the sweet spot?
Well, as you said, there's a big variation in the model range, and actually it's down to an individual's personal choice in terms of how focused they want their car to be. So in reality, they're all good. Actually, it really depends on your budget and what you're looking for as an individual. As the car evolved and evolved through its 7-year life cycle, the car got better, and obviously, in the end, with the largest ever road engine capacity in a 911 with the GT3 RS 4 litre.
Inside, the GT3 looks just as focused as it does on the outside. This roll cage was part of a no-cost option pack when the car was new, so lots of buyers took Porsche up on it. It gives the car a very race car-like feel. So does the Alcantara trim that's on pretty much everything, except the seats, which have this special flame-retardant fabric. It's worth noting though that these are the optional lightweight bucket seats, which would have cost the original owner more than £3,000. The focused nature of the GT3 meant that there wasn't a lot of luxury kit provided as standard. I mean, this car's got sat-nav, an iPod socket and phone integration, but it all cost extra, another £3,000 extra. When the car was new, buyers had a massive palette of paint colours to choose from, some more expensive than others. This Riviera blue colour we've got on our car cost the original buyer almost £3,000. And if you were prepared to part with enough cash, Porsche would have painted your car any colour you asked. That means there's lots of choice out there on the used market. And with a car as rare and exotic as the GT3, you don't have to stick to dark, sober colours in order to maintain your car's residual values. You can be as outlandish as you like, and it'll barely make any difference. There's no doubt that the 997 GT3 is one of the best driver's cars that Porsche ever made, but For our money, it's one of the best driver's cars anyone ever made. The engine sounds absolutely fearsome, and when you really give it some revs, it absolutely howls. Thrashing it really works wonders for the performance as well, because this is a race-derived engine. It revs to 8,500, and most of the real power sits right at the top of the dial. That does mean it's very tempting to work it to the limiter the whole time, but to be honest, this thing's so fast that the only time you're ever really going to be able to do that is on a racetrack. With it being such a favourite with track day enthusiasts, it's likely that most used GT3s will have had quite a tough life. Should buyers try and avoid cars that have been used for track days?
I think in terms of avoiding them, you are looking at a car that's sort of like the contradiction of the new owner that probably wants to use his own car for track days anyway. The car is absolutely comfortable with the type of usage that really anyone's going to give it. If you think of the racing drivers that are using a lot of the same components on our cars in endurance races, our history with Le Mans, the cars are built to last, and very proud to talk about the quality and the engineering heritage. I think that's why one of the reasons the car appeals so much, because you know the car can take a spirited driver day in, day out without failing in any concerning ways.
If there's one thing that's more exciting than the acceleration, it's the handling. You have to be quite precise with your throttle foot to keep maximum traction on the rear wheels, but when you get it right, you can get through corners at crazy speeds. The adaptive dampers keep body roll to a bare minimum, but there's still enough compliance to keep the tyres in contact with the ground over mid-corner bumps. The sharpness of the steering means the front end really dives in, and because it's hydraulic rather than electric, it's absolutely bristling with feel. Of course, finding a car that hasn't been used for track days is no guarantee of how reliable it's going to be. Are there any mechanical issues that buyers should look out for when buying used?
There's no standout issues in terms of the car. Actually, it's a very, very reliable setup. The cars are, in road trim, running at a much lower stress level to what they would be in endurance racing. The brand has a strong relationship with success in endurance racing, and the one thing Porsche knows about is the first thing to do to win an endurance race is to get to the finish.
If you're lucky enough to find a car with the optional carbon ceramic brakes fitted, make sure you snap it up. These would have cost the first owner £6,000, and they last a lot longer than normal brakes before they need maintenance or replacement. That's going to be particularly useful if you plan to do a lot of track days, which, let's face it, you probably will. And if you do take to the track regularly, you're going to be facing some pretty hefty tyre bills. Even a good set of boots is only going to last a couple of 100 miles when you're pounding around racetracks, and they're not cheap to replace. For Pirelli P0s, you're looking at around £200 for each front tyre and around £300 for each rear. A lot of GT3s do find their way back into the main dealer network, but there are a lot of Porsche independent specialists out there who stock GT3s as well. What are the benefits of buying through Porsche's Approved Used system?
Obviously, if you purchase a car through the Porsche Approved programme, then you have got the peace of mind of knowing that actually the car has been fully checked out and has quality assurances around it. So despite its historic use, actually the car will be prepared to make sure that it's in keeping with our 111-point check. And actually that car then comes with a 2-year factory back warranty, which really means that every component on the car is covered. So through that method of purchase, you have complete peace of mind, and I think that's why a lot of people do tend to come back to our network to buy that car. We also have some high quality standards that we expect our cars to meet, and my role, part of it, is to make sure that our centres are living up to that standard. So we have an independent audit programme that goes round and turns up unannounced to our Porsche centres and makes sure that the quality of the cars on display is meeting our standards, and we obviously are very proud of the fact that our network are doing that. It's by policing the delivery of our standards that we actually feel confident about putting our name to the cars and calling them Porsche approved.